Welcome back to another episode of My Legacy Garage. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the one that got away, with a twist. It's a little different, but more on that later. For right now, we need to go in the Wayback Machine, back to like the early to mid 90s. I mean, we're talking back in the day. This is where my obsession with cars began. A 1974 Chevy K10. Now, mind you, I wasn't even close to old enough to drive, but I drove it all around our little farmette. It was my grandfather's old truck, and when it wasn't really roadworthy anymore, he parked it up there and we used it as a farm truck. And it was fun. I put a lot of miles on that thing, going through the fields and all the little back roads and stuff, because, sneak it out on the road once in a while. And that's when bad stuff happens, like you wrap it around a tree when you're 15. Not only did I not have a driver's license, but it wasn't tagged, it wasn't insured, it wasn't inspected. It wasn't a good day. But, needless to say, the obsession didn't stop there. Not even a little bit. Not long after that truck met its fate, I bought a 1973 K20. So the first year of the square bodies, because I still love square bodies. And it was a wreck. I mean, it was bad. It didn't have a front clip on it. There was no engine. It was a mess. But over the course of several years, I went through that truck and rebuilt it from one end to the other. The original 350 from the K10 lived on in this truck. Took it out, cleaned it up, plopped it in there, didn't do anything else to it. Should have. It didn't live very long. But that's a whole different story. There was a ton of body work that needed to be done on it. I mean, the cab was bad. I mean, you all know how square bodies rust. So I did all that. Of course, it couldn't stay in the garage the whole time, so it ended up being outside, inside, outside, inside, covered in tarps. It was a mess. In fact, I think I even did some sanding and stuff outside because there wasn't room in the garage for it at the time. And eventually, it did get done. I, of course, chose the paint color that was the old 74, the candy apple red. It's still one of my favorite colors. And I put a snowplow on it because I lived in western Pennsylvania at the time, up in the mountains, and if you don't have a snowplow, you're not going anywhere in the wintertime. And I kept that truck for several years, and I drove it a good bit. Until one day, I decided I wanted something a little sleeker. Enter my third-gen Camaro phase. I mean, let's be honest, they're awesome. I had several of them, but my two favorite ones were probably my 89 RS. It was jet black. It was just a 6-cylinder with a 5-speed. It was literally nothing special, but I loved that car. Then, when I got rid of that one, I got an 85 Z28 with the 305 in it. Again, it wasn't fast, but I still loved the car. It had T-tops. That was a big deal back in the day, let me tell you. In the meantime, amidst all this other chaos, there were other vehicles. I mean, my obsession, it runs deep. There was a barn find Cadillac, 71 Eldorado, convertible, with the big old 500 Caddy in it. It was a nice car. It ended up in Poland, actually. When I sold it, it was on eBay, and it got shipped down to New Jersey and sent to Poland, of all places. Of course, square bodies have also played a huge role in my life, and I've had a ton of them. Some, kind of crappy that I would drive around, 6-banger, nothing special. And then some, that I did a lot of work on and fixed up and made look really nice. I mean, one comes to mind was my 81, I think it was, 81, 82, K10. I loved that truck, and it was beautiful. I had actually traded an 81 Z28 that I had that I blew the motor in for this truck in pieces, and then I put it all back together, and it ended up looking really, really nice. Speaking of trading vehicles, I had an 84, I think it was, Chrysler New Yorker. One of those ones that would talk to you like, fasten your seatbelts. His name was Charlie. Anyway, he got a little senile. He would go through everything he could say at once. And I didn't really drive it anymore, and a buddy of mine had a couple of old Datsun 280Zs. And he's like, hey, I need a car, and the Datsun has a blown head gasket right now. Can we just trade? And I'm like, yeah. So I got two 1978 Datsun 280Zs that I never did anything with. Eventually, I sold them for scrap, which I really, really regret because they're like made out of gold now. There was also vehicles that I would buy that were wrecked. and I would fix them up and sell them. Example, how about a 98 Jeep Wrangler? It was hit in the right front corner, like hit a pole or a bridge abutment or something, and smashed it up pretty good. And I ended up having to take the entire front clip off of this thing and rebuild all that, painted it all, put it back together. Ended up looking beautiful. It was black on black. Man, it was a good looking little Jeep. And I ended up selling that one too, mostly because transfer case exploded. So I put a new one in it and got rid of it. And there was also some just weirdly bizarre vehicles. There was one that I had. It was like a mid-70s Vega, like maybe a 74 Vega on a 68 Scout chassis. So it was four-wheel drive. Looked like an old AMC Eagle. Y'all remember them things? Those were cool too. My parents had one of them. But this thing was the biggest pile. I mean, I took this thing through the woods and just did unspeakable things to it. But it never quit. It always ran. It was reliable. I can't remember what happened. I think I sold it to somebody that wanted to use it to plow snow. I don't remember. There's been a lot of vehicles. But through all of those vehicles, there's been one constant. Remember Pap's truck, the 74 K10 that I wrecked? Well, he also had a 69 Camaro RS. And the heritage behind that car is pretty cool. My grandfather, on my mom's side, bought the car for her, brand new off the showroom floor. And she drove it for a number of years. And when my parents got married, after they'd been married for a little while, it got parked. And my dad, in his infinite wisdom, put a 4-barrel intake on it rather than the 2-barrel that it came with. And antifreeze leaked into the heads, into the block. It made a mess. It seized everything up, basically. So they sold it to a friend of theirs who thought he could get it running, and he couldn't. And he was a little upset about that. So my grandfather said, I'll tell you what, I'll buy that car back off of you for the same money. So he bought it back from him. Now mind you, this is late 70s, early 1980s, something along those lines. And my grandpa had the engine completely rebuilt in the car. Now, the car is special because it was a special order with the RS package. So you had the appearance of the muscle car, but with just a 352 barrel and a power glide transmission. Nothing special performance-wise, but it looked cool. Houndstooth interior, factory power windows, factory air. Oh my God, this car. It lived in the barn. That's where it stayed. Nobody took care of it. It had a cover on it sometimes when somebody would bother to make sure it was still on there. And I used to get it out once in a while and run it and drive it just to make sure it stayed usable, I guess. I don't know. I like to play with it, basically, is what it comes down to. And for years, I asked my grandpa, can I have that car? Can I have that car? Can I have that car? And he was always like, no, no, no. And then one day, he said yes. I'm not sure why he said yes. I'm not going to complain, though. Maybe, I'd like to think that it was because he knew how much I loved the car and he knew that I would take care of it, which I demonstrated by immediately loading it on my trailer and hauling it to my buddy's garage to completely tear apart. Now, mind you, it looked pretty decent. If you walked around it and looked at it, you could see it had rust around the wheel wells in the back. There was a lot of hidden rust where the vinyl top, where the trim went around like the back window and the upper quarter panels. You couldn't really see that it was rusty there, but we discovered that it really was. It had a little bit of rust in the bottom of the fenders. Oddly enough, the rocker panels, the floor, the doors, the trunk pan, that was all still good. But it did have some rust issues, and I decided I wanted to do a full restoration on this thing. Naturally, that started with hanging it from the ceiling to scrape all the old undercoating off the floorboards that had preserved them, so that we could clean it up and paint it. Make it nice and pretty and shiny and glossy underneath of there. It's a little unconventional, but it was hanging from a steel I-beam. It was a cement block building. It was fine, I promise. Then there was the issue of the quarter panels rotted out around the wheel well and, of course, where the trim went for the vinyl top. So, naturally, full quarter panels, right? Cut it open, drill out all the spot welds, cut the lead out where they seamed it in the sail panel, the whole 9 yards. Put 2 full quarter panels on it, inner wheel wells, the whole 9 yards. A lot of the hard work really got done. Of course, you have to paint the firewall and your subframe and all that and make that look nice, because you can't do a car like this and not do it to that sort of a detail. You just can't. At least that's my opinion. If you're going to tear it all the way apart and do it, by golly, you do it right. And that's what we did, at least as long as we could. Then my buddy sold his house and the garage that the Camaro was in, so I had to move it, and it wasn't done. I slapped it back together just enough to be able to move it, took it back up to the farm, stuck it in the garage up there, and there it sat for years. I mean years. I'm not even sure how long. Probably at least 15. And then my dad sold the farm and needed to move again. Now, it was easy to forget about it when it was out of sight, out of mind, because in the meantime, life happens. We've all been there. Get married, you have kids, get divorced, move out of state. All sorts of stuff happens. And the car, it's just, there's things that are more important. You got to pay the bills, feed the family, have a house to live in. You don't necessarily have $10,000, $20,000 to dump into a project car. So it didn't get done. However, I still have it. I moved it down here, and I've been looking at it ever since, and it drives me a little bit batty. But like I said earlier, this isn't necessarily a one that got away story. It's more of a one that got a little bit away from me story. It's not gone. I still have it, but it's not usable. It's not done. And there isn't really any immediate plans to have it done. Someday. It's been on the someday list for a long time. But we're getting warmer. Do you want to see it?
The car lives in the tractor shed now, along with a bunch of other junk. But that is the 1969 Camaro RS, with its brand new quarter panels and everything. Now, I hope to one day make this a channel car that gets built right on the channel. But there needs to be some pretty serious fundage first. I've never shown it on the channel before. And you can see those nice painted pictures were taken quite some time ago. There are pieces to the car everywhere. That's the dash right there with the instruments, and of course the grille, center console, all the stainless trim, which is wrapped and marked where it's from. Can't forget all the glass for the car, all in good condition. There's also things like this right here, which may look like an old sleeping bag, but in reality, they're the original interior seats out of that car, in excellent condition. The rear seat and bumpers are up in the rafters, because that makes sense.
Like I said, I really hope for this car to be on the channel someday. But for now, there just isn't money or time, really, to do it. So, it stays here. It's safe here. It's good and dry in here. There's no mice in here. A few snakes, but I don't mind them. I keep the mice away. And someday, it'll go out the door and over to the shop. That's the hope, anyway. Don't forget, if y'all like seeing rusty, crusty old junk come back to life, hit that like and subscribe button. I mean, that's what we do here, along with sort of the longer term projects. And they're not all as boring as that thing is. Whoa, that was a little sneak peek. I'd like to thank y'all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. I know I did. It was fun to think about where it all started and where it's come to since then. Another Jeep. And y'all have seen all the other vehicles we've done on the channel. And there's been ones that haven't been on the channel too. I mean, the channel's, what, a year old? A little over? There's been a lot of vehicles go through my life. And like I said, that 69 Camaro, that's been the constant. And it always will be. I'll never sell it. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all have a great day. We'll see you next time. Whoa, that was a little sneak peek.